Everybody, welcome. I am here with the absolutely wonderful Kimberly Butler here on this Memorial Day, talking about Kimberly's life, career, all the lessons that you've learned. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you, Lev. It's an honor to be here. Happy Memorial Day, everyone.
So, Kimberly, let's go back to the origin story of Kimberly Butler. Where were you born? How everything got started?
Okay, well, I was actually born in Queens, New York. I'm from Hollis, but my family goes back actually to New York State, Upper New York State, where my family started when my, let's see, fifth or sixth great grandfather came in 1630 to America and landed in Boston and moved up to Connecticut and started a farm there.
And what kind of farm was it?
I think the usual things that they lived off the land. So they were planting carrots and cabbage and all that sort of thing. And it was right outside of New Haven. So they had a very interesting little community. And, it grew and it grew and it grew.
And how did this change to Kimberly Butler living in an orphanage?
Oh, that's a long story from then, because that grandfather is doing that in that's the late 1600s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so his great grandson in 1776 joins the Continental Army. And that's my fifth great grandfather, Abel Butler, who served in the Continental Army under George Washington and was with him at Valley Forge in the Connecticut Fifth Army.
Wow. That is incredible to think all of the links that you have going back to the past. But what was your process of discovering that? Since you started out on your lonesome, it must have been a real shock when you found that out. But what was the initial process of you kind of getting to a state where you were able to face all of these different fears and demons you experienced growing up without this connection?
Okay, well, when I was very, very small, my family was torn apart and I was put in this orphanage in Queens. And it was very traumatic. And I lived there for years and I just didn't fit in. I didn't fit in with the kids that were in the orphanage and I didn't fit in with the kids at the local school that was right around the corner. So I grew up, got reunited with my family eventually, went to college. And when I was in college, we went up to visit my great uncle, who was the last of that line that lived on Brandy Hill. And he showed it to me and there was a historical marker. And it says, here's Brandy Hill, home of the fabulous Butler family, who in the 17 and 1800s ran a tin shop, a B&B, a stagecoach stop, all these things that they had done. So they were these amazing pioneer entrepreneurs that were in that area. And then I got in touch with a lady whose specialty was to go into these graveyards that are all over the Northeast, because that's, this is where the war between the states, the colonies, and the Great British Army took place, is the Northeast. And she had gone to every cemetery in that area because they usually were across the street or across the road from the main house. They buried you on their land. So this man had bought the mountain of Brandy Hill and my cemetery was across the street and completely overgrown. And my uncle had shown it to me 20 some odd years ago. And just about 5 years ago, I started to feel that something was calling me to go and to find Brandy Hill and take a look at what was happening there. So I did. I ended up going up with a friend of mine. And first thing that I noticed is the historic landmark sign has been moved. And it's been moved a half mile up the road. It's in front of this guy's office. And he comes running out and he says, "Hi, can I help you? Are you interested in renting a room?" I said, "No, I'm Kimberly Butler." And he just about fainted. He says, oh, you know, a lot of your cousins have come here and they're very, very angry with you, with me, because I moved the sign. I said, well, you know, they kind of don't matter that much. You know, I'm the direct descendant, but I'm not angry about the sign, although you should have asked. I said, I'm worried about the cemetery. And he said, well, I'd like to make the cemetery part of the tour of my place. You know, it was like a thing out of Dirty Dancing. You know, they had a hall, they had cabins, they had golf, they had a swimming pool. He says, you know, so that he wanted to make a little trail, and, you know, you'd see this graveyard where this revolutionary hero was buried. So after going through massive trees and, you know, vines and all this stuff and broken iron gates, I find the cemetery. And this amazing sense of shame comes over me. And I just was, how could any of my family that is still in that area, you know, they're cousins of cousins of cousins, that are so absolutely annoyed about the fact of the sign being moved, have not kept up this cemetery. So I made a commitment that I was going to do that. And I came back about 3 weeks later, and I stood at the cemetery and I spoke to my ancestors, and this great wave of love came over me. And I think it was them acknowledging that they had not been forgotten.
That's very important.
It was a very deeply spiritual moment, deeply, deeply spiritual. And I found out that actually the Butler family is very famous in America for being a family that makes American Butler tin. Their letter boxes, their pictures, their little pencil boxes. And there's only 2 families in America that made them. So for folk art collectors, it's a big thing. So it's a very interesting history that started all with my grandfather, who, you know, came over. He was the youngest son of an English lord. And I go back to the Vikings, we found out, who came over with the Normandy invasion. And he was from that group. He was the youngest son of an English lord. He was a doctor, but he didn't get anything. And I just sensed that he didn't like the class system, because he was able to read and write, and he was a doctor. So that meant coming to the colonies, he was a free man. He had something to devote. If you didn't have something to give to the colonies, you weren't allowed to come here. So he came, he was a doctor, and then here I am. And that's almost 400 years ago.
Wow.
So I have some pretty major street cred that I take very, very seriously about our country, because as a photojournalist, I've traveled all over the world.
Would you say that you developed, when you were living in the Otley home, that understanding even before you knew about your ancestry, that you had this thirst for freedom, and the conditions that you were living under felt pretty stagnating to your fiery spirit?
Well, there was no question that I had a fiery spirit, but then that comes from the other side too. My grandfather was a Queen's Own Cameron Highlander who fought in the trenches of World War I. So to remember him also today, who got attacked by a German with a bayonet and put his hand up and took the bayonet away from him and killed him with it. And wow, his fingers were missing, and he spent 3 months in a French hospital. And the trenches of World War I were appalling. If anybody's seen 1917 or Paths of Glory, much better movie, you'll see what they went through. And he came to America and had a sponsor somewhere right after World War I, and he became a house painter because he wanted to be actually a film editor, but nobody would let him in the union. It was controlled by some other group of people, and he couldn't get in. So he became a house painter to take care of his family, worked for about 2 years, and sent for my grandma. My grandma came over, and then, you know, my mom was born here in America. So I have it from both sides. You know, I have that great Scottish Highlander, you know, no, I don't want to do that because Highlanders are not told what to do. And then I've got this, you know, royal bloodline that traces back to the Vikings. And I also have this finger. Can you all see my finger?
Yes.
Okay. This is called a Viking finger. And that's why we absolutely know that that's what I am, because this is only comes from one thing. And it was funny, on ancestry.com, I had one little line that went up to Norway. And then this developed in my 20s. So, you know, I use it as an early warning system to my enemies, because anybody that studied, they know that. So back to the original question. So yes, I never really felt like I belonged in the orphanage. And, but what kid does? You know, all these kids had their own story. You know, either they were abandoned, they were orphaned, everybody had a story, but they would pick on other kids. There were a lot of bullies, and I wasn't a bully. Never, never, never. I was always for the underdog.
And this was also your inspiration for writing the book, The Art of Fear. Or
yes.
Writing and photographing for that book. And it's a very beautiful book.
Thank you.
All the pages are just tremendous.
Thank you.
What I wanted to ask you about that is, were you still practicing the art of fear after you got out of the Otley home and were on your way to becoming a photographer? Was there any transitionary point between the Otley home and you being a photographer? Were you experimenting with other things that you had to face?
Well, sure, because, you know, I went through 1968 and 1969 in Queens, New York. And America was burning down between the civil rights movement and the Vietnam movement. So, you know, all the kids that were beating each other up in junior high school all became friends in high school. So, you know, it was a very tumultuous time. They were busing kids into our neighborhood. We were all afraid of each other. We didn't know who was what, and we all came from different backgrounds. But the amazing thing that brought us all together was music. We all loved Motown. And all of a sudden, music just started to penetrate, and we found out how much we had in common, and it brought us all together. So by high school, everybody's friends. So high school, then I start developing into a young woman, kind of like looking around where I want to go, what I want to do. And photography just kind of spoke out to me. I took a trip to Russia my first freshman year in college, and I took a camera, and then I was hooked.
What did you do in Russia? What did you photograph?
A lot of the churches and the buildings. I was in love with architecture, you know, just as a fan, you know, to look at the beautiful buildings that I think Peter the Great was very influenced by the Persian architecture. Is that true?
He was very influenced, from what I understand, by the architecture in the Netherlands.
Really? Those
yes.
onion domes?
Well, the onion domes, those came before Peter the Great.
Ah, well, I'm asking the right guy, because you're the expert on Russia.
That was actually done. They were beautiful. Those were actually done by an Italian architect, from what I remember.
Wow. Well, he called everybody in. He was a very smart guy. Well, they are amazingly beautiful. Russia's an amazing country.
Well, I think that Peter the Great has a similar spirit to you, where he didn't want to just stay in his ivory tower. He wanted to go out, see the world, learn how to build ships. That's why he went to the Netherlands originally. So there is something in that Promethean spirit of wanting to discover and invent that propelled humanity forward. And you are sharing in that spirit, as well as documenting all the different things that are going on in the world, positive and negative. So before I move on to your photography career, I just want to let people know that your book, The Art of Fear, it's an amazing book, and it is out for sale today.
Yes.
And where could people get this book?
It's on Amazon. And what I did is I photographed my daughter as a model throughout the book, and she's wearing a gas mask, strangely enough. And she's in all these different places that spoke to me, that represent the different things that I went through, trying to understand myself, going inside, looking inside myself, trying to figure out, you know, who I was, where I was going. And I found out while doing that book that I was just somebody that wanted to work on my own, somebody that wanted to follow my own path, that I wasn't a team player. I didn't want to work in an office. I didn't want to die death by cubicle, that I wanted to go out. I wanted to be able to help other people, that I wanted to go to, see the world, just see the Middle East, find out, what's going on there really besides what they show on television.
And by the way, right now the audience is seeing the screen share of your beautiful cover for Art of Fear,
Thank you.
where you have your daughter wearing the gas mask in this very icy environment. Can you say a little bit about the inspiration for this shot?
Yeah, well, this was at the very beginning of it. And this represents the solitude and pretty much what everybody's going through now, where we have to stay inside, we're masked, everybody needs a haircut, we all know, and we're kind of in a frozen state now where we can't go out, we can't do what we want to do, we've got to wait. And that's what's saving us. That's what's so great about right now, is that, if we do what we're told, in New York, our numbers are going down. And, for somebody like me, all I have to do is stay in. And, here's another shot.
That's beautiful.
From, The Art of Fear, where I've taken to a cave. What I did in working on this book is I read a lot of Carl Jung and a lot of Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell was a big advisor to Lucas on Star Wars. So you'll recognize the cave from when Luke finds out who his father is. So a cave represents, the id. When you enter your id and your subconscious and you find the truth about yourself, you've got to go in. So many people look outside themselves. If they drink or they smoke or they date a lot, they do this, and I had all these issues from being, in this orphanage. So I had to go in and do that work. And that process with my daughter and going to those different places and then writing about it with the photographs was a tremendous cleansing for my soul. It really worked. And I was walking by MoMA and I walked by the librarian for MoMA and she says, "Oh my goodness, what book is that?" And I said, "Well, that's my book, The Art of Fear." And she said, "I need a copy of it for our permanent collection." Now, this image represents the burning away of my ego. The ego has to be burned away and has to be dead.
That is so beautiful.
Thank you. Because we use our ego to protect ourselves. But when it comes out of control and you always think you're right and everybody else is wrong, like our president, as a good example, you've got to burn that away. And then the birth of humility and understanding of other people and listening to their side of the story, all that came with that.
It's almost like a phoenix, where the phoenix burns away and then it's born anew. So that is also
I love that.
Well, it's something that I hope would happen on a personal level and also on a national level too, not just with us, but any other country, where we learn from our mistakes and then we are born anew. And I think these cycles do happen now and again, if not
we're in it
all
right
the time.
now.
We are. We're definitely in the cycle.
China took 5 days to tell the truth. And then President Trump took four weeks to tell us the truth.
Well, let's see what's happening now. It's a very exciting time to be alive. Like the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times. But you've encountered more than your fair share of interesting times, not only being in Russia, but going to Jordan, going to the refugee camps, meeting Gaddafi. I'm curious what that was like, you meeting Gaddafi for the first time.
Well, I was Barbara Walters' photographer for years, so we went everywhere. But she used to say Gaddafi was her greatest interview. Now, well, just a little segue. This is me in the refugee camp in Jordan. And this is with all the little kids. These were all the Syrian children whose parents carried them across the desert into Jordan. Jordan has an amazing king who just set up with the UN thousands of tents for 2 million people and water deliveries. And these are the children. So you'd see people coming in off the desert with a water jug and their child. They built hospitals, and these guys would follow me everywhere. They were just my crew. Nobody could hurt me. I had my own crew. They were great.
And we have a comment, by the way, from Ellen DeLillo. She says, "Awesome interview."
Thank you, Helene. Helene from Hawaii. All right. So the Gaddafi thing was many years ago. Gaddafi had put, well, there's a picture of me, Ronald Reagan, our president, in a fantastic move. Gaddafi had bombed the Marine barracks and killed 200 Marines. So in response to that, Ronald Reagan puts a bomb in his living room. So Barbara Walters says, okay, we're going over. He's agreed to an interview because Gaddafi now is scared to death of Ronald Reagan. I would be too, because very nice guy, knew him very well, but he wasn't to be messed with. So he did bomb his house, but we missed him. But so this is me in the house taking photos of myself. And we had lunch with him, and like all evil dictator people, they are completely charming. Evil is charming, okay? I've met a lot of evil people and in my travels, and they are charming. That's the way they get millions of people to listen to them. Go back in history and you see it every single time. People fall for it, and it's trouble.
Was Gaddafi able to have a magnetizing effect on you as well, or did you know better by that time that this guy is one to watch out for?
Oh, I was totally hip to him, but I got him to sign my book. He gave us all sorts of presents. I have like fabric and books on Libya, but he gave me a little green book, and it was fantastic. And I had him sign it, and then I went through it, and then he said, why women can't run the world, and it was because we got our periods. So that's why we couldn't run the world. So how could I not be a fan of his? I mean, look at the way he thought. You know, I think the Libyan people spoke out loud and clear about how they felt about him, which was sad. But, you know, that's what happens when people are pushed so far and, you know, people are dragged away in the middle of the night. This is what's going to happen to their leader.
It's a sad state of affairs now, too,
Yes.
where they have all those slave markets in Libya and a lot of bad stuff, which brings up the question, how do we choose the best out of all the worst opinions that we have, all the worst options that we have before us? And it's a very difficult question. But going to something, let's say, lighter with the celebrities, would you say that there is a similarity to the world leaders and celebrities the way that they are with you?
No, not really, because, you know, the thing about being a photographer, especially if you're dealing with somebody that's in a lot of power, you have to understand that when you walk in, you're grabbing somebody's soul. You're being very intrusive. And even though most of these people are used to being a character in a TV show, they're not models. If you look at these people, you've got Taylor Swift, Tim Gunn, the great Muhammad Ali, John Leguizamo, you know, all these people are used to playing a role. But when I come in, I'm asking them to be themselves. So that requires me to be myself. And in my journey to self-discovery, I've become very light, very easy. And so I project that to them, and they respond in kind. And they feel relaxed. Davey Dig feels relaxed to show me his abs, because I said, please show me your abs. And he did. He was great. And he's coming out in a new show, Snowpiercer, so don't miss that. So it just, you know, I treat everyone the same. The man in the refugee camp that has a wife and 7 children, and he's got no hope. Whatever was left of his home is gone. You know, what hope do his children have? But at least they're warm and they have water and food. You know,
it's very important.
See that kind of thing. And then I see people mad because they don't have Netflix and they have to stay in the house for 85 days. You know, I get pretty pissed off at them. Okay.
Yeah, I get it. It's understandable. We have so much here in this country that it's important to keep things in perspective.
Speaking of great leaders, this is the father, his name is Mario Cuomo. I photographed him. And this is the father of our great governor, Andrew Cuomo, who just today was lynched his effigy was lynched today by some New Yorkers and some people around the country. And I am very angry at these people because this man is a tremendous leader. Every morning he has come on television and he has said to us, here's the facts. This is where we are. This is what we need to do to bring our numbers down. If you'll remember, 2 months ago, New York led the world in this pandemic. And we have managed as one people on a tiny island with our boroughs that surround us to bring our numbers. I think we're almost below 100 deaths a day. And he did it by being calm with us and also quoting one of the greatest leaders of all time during wartime. And make no mistake about it, we are at war. The problem is this enemy is invisible. So all these people that on Memorial Day are jumping off boats and getting drunk and not social distancing, okay, this is an enemy, just like during World War II. So what Cuomo was doing with us was showing quotes from Winston Churchill. And it was the perfect thing to do, to show us these things, that this is a real enemy. We have to stick together, that we can never surrender, that we have to be calm, we have to stay together. And that's what New York is doing. We do not have incidences in New York. Like I just witnessed a woman at Costco actually spitting on a young man because she would not put on a mask. Now, let me tell you, that young kid could now have COVID because she spit on his face, in his eyes. If she pulled that in New York, we would take her outside. Now, just today on Staten Island, for those of you who are living around the country, Staten Island is also one of our boroughs of New York City. It's just past the Empire State Building, and there she is. A woman refused to wear a mask in one of our supermarkets. She was shamed to leave by other New Yorkers. This is how we are defeating this disease. Okay? To the people out there that are disrespecting law enforcement, that are having parties, that are not socially distancing, that are challenging our cops, hanging our governors in effigy and lynching them in effigy, how disgraceful to the history of the United States and on our pain of lynching to actually take that kind of action. It's disgraceful. You are disgraceful, all right? And you're gonna learn over history how disgraceful you were.
While I can't speak for all the people who are going about this, I wonder if, let's say, for some of those people, what they fear is an encroachment upon liberty. And it is a very important question to ask. Where should the line be drawn between liberty and security, especially when it comes to you being able to infect other people, thus infringe upon their liberty?
I'm asking you to wear a mask. My father took his last final and left for Europe to fight in the mud. I'm asking you to wear a mask. That's all. Okay? I'm asking you to wear a mask. How difficult is that? That's against your rights. What about the rights of the person next to you? What about the rights of the guy next door's grandmother? Okay? We are in this together. We are the United States of America. When you have people who come out, who are supposed to be our leaders and say, oh, New York's a blue state, so we're not going to give them any money. We're only going to give to red states because they voted for us last time. That to me is traitorous talk. Did George Washington say that? Let me tell you what George Washington said. When John Adams, who was the second president of the United States, for those who don't know, came in and took his vow of office, Washington walked behind him because he now was president of the United States. Okay? This is what my grandfather fought and died for. These guys didn't have shoes. They didn't have coats. They were freezing. They were dying of cholera at Valley Forge. And these people don't want to wear a mask. We're united. It's the United States of America. Okay?
And by the way, what we're looking at right now is Abel Butler's 5th Connecticut Regiment card. Can you explain a little bit about this image?
Yeah, well, actually what this is his paycheck. It's his pay stub. So that's his number, and it correlates with the date and the time and everything, just to make sure that he was paid. So you see, it says Abel Butler, and he was in the 5th Connecticut Regiment, which is right for all you guys out there that are from Connecticut. Shout out. He was right near New Haven, a place called Branford, and there you go, Revolutionary War. And he was a volunteer. He had to leave his wife and his children and went to fight to get underneath from the tyranny of the British, who are now our like best friends, okay? But they did it. And so all that we're asking now is that you wear a mask. And do I believe in the right to bear arms? Absolutely. I'm the child of a military family. In every American conflict, every single conflict, somebody from the Butler family signed up and went, never drafted. Okay?
What some people may be afraid of is that because you are very nuanced, and I think that this is a very important quality that you have, you are able to look beyond all these left-right stereotypes that people have. But I think what people are afraid of is that when certain laws end up getting implemented in the future, let's say as far as tracking people to prevent infection, people are afraid that there are going to be others out there who wouldn't want a good tragedy to go to waste. And
yes, I agree and I understand. But you know what? We have to deal with the here and now. And right now we have an invisible enemy. And this invisible enemy, I understand that people maybe can't compute that. You know, you're not wearing a mask and you're standing next to somebody and you sneeze. You could have just killed that person. We have to deal with the here and now. We've lost 100,000 Americans as of today. And one of them was my best friend, Honey Ruddy, one of the healthiest persons I know, attacked her heart, killed her. She just dropped dead. Now, if you wanna come and see some of the photographs, or maybe you have to experience what it's like to live in a city where we have tractor trailers that are air conditioned and full of frozen bodies because we can't bury them fast enough. We have funerals running at 10 minutes all day long. And families can't even go to the funerals. I mean, this is the reality. If, you know, I'm watching TV today and there's beach parties, and do those people actually worrying about surveillance and chips 20 years from now? No, they're not. They're worried about a drink and getting laid. Come on.
I don't think there's going to be that much we can say to those people. But there are people, though, Kimberly, that I think we can reach out to who could strike a good balance between being able to wear a mask, protect themselves and others, while at the same time making sure that no laws end up getting passed meanwhile that would further damage the liberty that's slowly waning away from us as it is.
Absolutely. But yes, there's balance. You know, it's called rational thinking. Okay. Right now, I have to wear this mask when I go out, because if I don't, I can contract the virus. Okay. If I have to deal with the here and now on that, because we're in a war. It's a war. In World War II, my grandparents, there's the air sirens in London. Let's get the tea cozy. Let's get the cards. For 11 months, they lived underground in the subways. You think that they were thinking, oh, well, what happens with our rights when we get back? They're worried they're going to be speaking German. Okay? This is the bottom line. We have to deal with what's on the plate. And there's a middle line here. Our governor said the other day, the great Andrew Cuomo, just great. One human life is not worth not wearing a mask. And that's it. You know, I cannot believe when I see with my own eyes on CNN or Fox or whatever thing, I'm watching these guys going into the state capitol armed. And I grew up going to the range every weekend. I get it. was raised with weapons, get it, hobby, sport, get it, hunting, get it, got it. All right. It's over your shoulder. You want to show your right to bear arms? Fantastic. But let's keep in mind, this is the state capitol. If you force your way into the Capitol chambers and you've got that gun in your hand and it's cocked and it's loaded, you're going to spark something off quicker than, and over what? The fact that you can't open your store, they're trying to save lives. So if you're trying to make a point about the right to carry, hold an assembly. But when you see these guys, when I saw that man, I think everyone's seen that photograph where he's like foaming at the mouth, screaming at the cop, and the cop doesn't have a mask over his right to come in there and be heard. I think a guy like that is more of an exhibitionist than he is someone that really cares about his rights. You know, I look at it a little bit differently. And I also look at it as a New Yorker. You know, I think that I've been all over the world and I've seen where people have no civil rights, none, starting with the Soviet Union in '74. I would walk in, there'd be bread lines. The sea would part like Moses for an American. I'd go right to the front of the line for bread because they don't want me to say I stood on a bread line, right? Lev, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Right. So I have been in some of the most horrific places where there's no food, no running water. The government will decide when they'll put the running water on. All they're asking you is to stay inside. If you've got to go outside, wear a mask. The other thing, opening our businesses, we're all hurting. I haven't worked either. None of my friends have worked. We're all out of work. The economy has stopped. But I believe in the power of this country to turn it all around.
There are certain things, though, that at least from looking at it from the side seem to be pretty unfair when it comes to, let's say, certain retail mom and pop stores not being able to open while Sam's Club, Costco, and Walmart and Target get to stay open. And it
yes, I totally
like,
agree. I totally, absolutely, totally agree that I'm upset about that also. And I don't think that's fair. And Governor Cuomo, you need to do something about that. Okay? Because that is not fair.
And this brings us to your recent Alice in Wonderland.
We're going to change the topic, but I got that off my chest.
Well,
okay,
I think it's definitely related because here we are dealing with these very big, very privileged families who are also subsidized by the federal government.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there's no question. I mean, Amazon pays no taxes. We got to enter a new world now. We have to take this opportunity to create a new world. This corporate tax, they don't get corporate tax. Amazon pays no taxes. These Amazon guys that are coming to deliver to me, I overtip them like crazy. Okay, so yes, I'm with you on that. And that should be one of the great things that stops.
And look at this photo. Here we have the caterpillar and we have Alice on the mushroom. And can you tell us a little bit about this?
All right. So I got very angry at the Sackler family. The Sackler family were the ones who were making the drug OxyContin. Now this is before the pandemic, and tens or hundreds of thousands, I think it was up to 400,000 kids and adults had died of OxyContin overdoses. And it really hit a head when I was down in Charleston, South Carolina, and my daughter had a sore throat. And I took her into on health drive-in place. And the guy said, "Oh yeah, you have a sore throat, so I'm gonna give you some OxyContin." And I said, "OxyContin? She has strep throat. You know, why are you giving her? You're not giving her OxyContin." So he runs out of the room, and then the nurse goes up to her and says, "Young lady, how old are you?" And she says, you know, she doesn't look her age. So she says, like, "I'm 26. She says, "Your mother has no right to tell you what to do." And I was like, I'm from Queens. You want to go outside? You're not going to make a junkie out of my kid. I said, "What are you all getting a piece of the action here?" And that's exactly what the truth was. All those doctors, all those pharmacies were getting kickbacks to push that drug. Okay. So I thought, why don't I do a little something, something? There was a great photographer by the name of Nan Golden that was doing protests at all the big museums where the Sacklers had their names on the walls because they gave millions of dollars to the arts. So I figured, why don't I do it my way? And as a shout out to all these, people that have been arrested, Nan Golden's been arrested for doing some of these things, and do Alice in Opioid Land. So if you want to bring that up again, and here we go. Here's Alice. She's fallen into opioid land, and she's completely stoned and knocked off her head because she had stolen pills from her mother's medicine chest. And so she's asleep on the mushroom after that little hookah smoking caterpillar, who's just evil, got her nice and high. And that's the beginning. That's her beginning in opioid land.
I love the caterpillar, by the way.
Yeah, that caterpillar is a very good friend of mine, actually somebody who is writing my memoirs. I can't name her unless she says I can.
And right now that we have the coronavirus going on,
Mm-hmm.
what is your plan for the future? Because you're not traveling right now. You're not going anywhere, but you're in the city and you're taking very beautiful photos of the isolated New York City bereft of people. And what are your plans right now?
Yeah, well, I've got my dog, Marley, and most of my postings have been of Marley. So I'm taking pictures of him, and I'm just like everybody else. I spend a lot of time on the phone with my friends. What me and my friend Julie have been doing is watching our favorite movies together, but we're on the phone. So we do lines from the movie, we make fun of the characters, we do all fun things like that. So it's been really, it hasn't been that bad compared to what this country has sacrificed in every other war. What I'm being asked to do is absolutely nothing. If I could go out and I could fight and I could help the police department or work in the hospitals, I would be blessed. But unfortunately, the best thing I can do is what my governor asked me to do, and that's stay inside.
Well, right now we are able to talk to each other through these screens, and I think this dissemination of knowledge is going to help a lot of people out. Unfortunately, we also have censorship still alive and well on all these major platforms, which brings me to another project that you were doing last year, Censored, and I wanted to touch on that.
Okay, well, Censored is an ongoing project, and here's the first one I did. And shout out to Margaret Atwood and all the fans of Handmaid's Tale. So blessed be the fruit. And it's amazing how many books in America are censored. So I took books that I loved and I wrote on the bodies of the people words, famous quotes from the book. But in this case, I made her a human cornucopia because that's just basically what they use her for. Is to propagate and make other little people like her to wait on people, because women have no rights in the future. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to show another one of those.
We definitely should. There are a couple of those censored photos that I saw, and they were very beautiful. And what were some of the books that these photos were based on?
You guys, listen, if everybody wants to see them, they're on my site. They're at, this is great. This is Lord of the Rings. And this is my little nephew. And this is from Lord of the Rings and Nothing is Evil in the Beginning. So, this is a beautiful shot. But if you'd like to see them all, because some of them are nudes, they're on my site, KimberlyButler.com, and you can go to Censored and you can see them. And it's going to be an ongoing thing. I'm getting ready to do Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and I'm just going to keep doing it. I mean, Sandman, Huckleberry Finn, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Ulysses, there we go, Persepolis, banned. And these are banned in America. You'd expect that this is banned in Iran. Okay, of course it's banned in Iran, but this is banned in America. And Where's Waldo is banned in America.
What?
Because some mother with a magnifying glass, I think it was the Hubble, took a Where's Waldo beach scene, and with her Hubble, she's looking through, and there must be 5,000 characters in the beach scene, and she sees a woman this big who like took her top of her bathing suit off and got it banned from the school library. So one person can be hugely dangerous.
Just as one person can be hugely effective in the positive sense too.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I have a lot of faith in the kind of things that you're doing right now.
Well, thank you. See, I like to do things that mean things. So this is where I want to devote my life. Fighting censorship, and shout out to Queens, everybody Queens out there. And our governor is from Queens. All right. That's why we rule. All right. We're borough kids. Very, very tough, but very nice. Okay. Censored, my Allison Opioid Land. What is my other thing? Well, now I'm going into hunger for children. I just spoke to somebody yesterday who is starting this big hunger campaign for children hunger in America. So over the weekend, I came up with some copy and an idea, and I'm hoping tomorrow that they love it, because I'd like to devote myself to that now.
That sounds beautiful. Kimberly, you are such an amazing person. You have had such a astounding experience going all around the world, meeting celebrities, dictators, refugee kids, talking about all these important issues. You are absolutely one of a kind, and I think that we are honored to have you with us here in this great experience.
Well, I appreciate that, and you know, of all the people that I've met and all the places that I've been, the most proud I am are my trips to Chechnya, to get people out, to get them to Israel so that they're out of the war, my trips to Kosovo. And these are, don't think that I'm going to a spa. These are where people are shooting. You know, there's active war going on. We're landing a refitted 747, loading people on, trying to get out at night. I was kidnapped in Chechnya, which will be in my memoirs, written by Julie Farron, as told to. When I think back of all the celebrities and the presidents and the dictators, the important things were the refugees, thanks to the King of Jordan and his sister, Ali al-Hussein, may peace be upon them. Those are the important things, are helping other people and fighting opioid addiction, fighting censorship, and now let's not leave a kid behind and send a kid in America to bed hungry.
Definitely. And I wanted to give a few shout outs to the people who are watching right now. We have Caitlin watching.
Caitlin is a star of my book. That's my
right.
daughter.
And we have Karen Plitt saying, "Good on you, Kimbo."
That is my oldest friend. She's down in Australia. We've been best friends since second grade.
Wow. And we also have, before we had Jennifer Bendatali.
Mm-hmm.
We had Stuart Perlin.
Stewie's my buddy. Yes.
And we have Rose Stevens.
Yes, Rose Stevens is actually a cousin. She's a Butler cousin. She lives in Washington.
And also we have Milena Acevedo.
Millie. She's a great photographer. She used to work for me, and then she moved to DC, and now she's fantastic. You need a photographer in the DC area, call me, and I'll give you Millie. She's great.
Excellent. And we have Ellen DeLillo saying aloha.
Aloha. Listen, I'm missing those palm trees. I think after this, it's time for a trip to Hawaii.
I could use a trip to Hawaii myself. Well, anyway, Kimbo, this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so
everybody,
much.
Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Great. And don't forget to give for children hungry in America.
And follow me on Twitter at Lev Po. If you need, by the way, if anybody needs help creating a podcast, doing a live stream, I'm your guy.
And he's great. Peace.
Take care.